Hi, listeners, and welcome to Random New Mexico. I am your host, Kella Ella. This is my second ever episode of the podcast. I named this Conspiracies, Theories, and Shenanigans because it includes all three. I have two guests that I have been so excited to do this podcast. I have John. John, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's John Austin, and I've always been into UFOs.
Okay, cool. And of course, my second guest, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. My name is Norio Hayakawa, and I just love New Mexico because it's just a special place in any sense of the word.
No, that's absolutely true. I'm actually from New Mexico, and I move away and come back, and it's just crazy how different and how much of a gem it really is. Like, there's so much to uncover in the state as a whole. So again, thank you so much for being here with me. So basically we can start off with you, John, if you want to just kind of tell us, maybe some things that have happened to you, any information or news that has to do with New Mexico in general. Whatever you want to share with us, just go ahead and elaborate on what you've seen.
Regarding UFOs?
Whatever you'd like, yeah. Any type of conspiracy, any theory, any event, any kind of phenomenon that you're like, hey, people should hear about this, right?
Well, there's a lot of high strangeness in this state. It's a very spiritual place. Mm-hmm. If you grow up here, you know that. If you live here for a while, you'll learn that. That's why I'm thankful to be from here. It's a big reason. And yeah, I've always been into the paranormal. I've always been into the unexplainable. I had this old Life magazine, I think, and it was called Mysteries of the Unexplained from like the 70s or something, and I used to read that all the time. And I've just always been into UFOs. Always. And I've always believed in aliens. Might seem like a weirdo, might seem crazy, but not so much anymore. If you just look at Congress. But yeah, I'm just super into it, and I always have been, and I've always been really fascinated by it. Like, I remember as a little kid, we'd go on road trips through the state because it's huge. And I remember, like, at a gift shop one time, the lady working behind the counter talking about, because it's a part of the culture, like UFOs are woven into the cultural fabric of this state and always have been. And
New Mexico too.
Yeah,
I think
just always, it's always been a part of this state. It's always been a part of New Mexico.
Yeah.
And I remember this lady working at this store just talking about it. I was a little kid. Like, I hadn't asked her about UFOs or anything, but she was like, yeah, they like to hide in clouds. And I just thought that was really interesting. And like these crazy shaped clouds, and I've just heard a bunch of different stories, and I've just always been super fascinated by it. And so I've just always been into it. But I never really saw one. I didn't see one for a really long time. I always wanted to see one, and I didn't for most of my life. I didn't until I was in my 20s. That was when I saw my first UFO.
Okay.
And that was a pretty crazy experience. It was kind of intense because I was having like a intense breakup conversation with my ex-girlfriend, and we're in a parking lot in Santa Fe at this. We're at a parking lot for a jungle gym, like a playground for kids. And it was like a park playground with a parking lot, and there's houses all around, like a little residential area. And it was facing towards the Sandias, so you could see the Sandias in the distance.
Okay.
And me and my ex-girlfriend, we were having this like deep breakup conversation or whatever, all emotional in her car. And then all of a sudden she was like, "What's that?" And I looked over to where she was looking, and we looked to the west, and it was in between the Sandias and Santa Fe, and it was this massive football-shaped glowing UFO, and I'm guessing it was disc-shaped, but if you looked at it sideways, it would be shaped like a football.
Okay.
And it was glowing like reddish yellow, kind of like a lava lamp, but lava lamps aren't like that. It was just like these like shifting colors. I had never seen anything like that, and it didn't make any noise or anything. And I was super excited. I was like, that's a UFO. And I like jumped out of her car and started like jumping around her car, like super excited about it. And she was like, shut up. Cause it was like nighttime. And,
Right. Yeah.
and, but it was super exciting. And we just watched it and it just glided. It glided over the I-25 and it just moved like a hockey puck, like an air puck on a air hockey table.
Oh, yeah.
Just glided like that, super smooth, and just went over the I-25. But it was pretty high. It was at least like 3,000 to 5,000 feet up. I think it was over the Sandias, above the Sandias, higher than the Sandias. And while we were looking at it, my ex-girlfriend was like, and what are those behind it? And there was 6 planes behind it, at least 6 planes. And they were lined up like dominoes in a line, following it, escorting it. And they were all blinking.
So were you like close enough to see the planes, or was it the blinking
Well,
lights?
it was
that
nighttime.
kind of give it
Yeah,
away,
so
right?
we couldn't see the planes because it was nighttime and it was
Sure.
in the sky, but we could definitely see their navigation lights, and it was nuts. Like they were escorting it, and if you
Interesting.
compared the size, yeah, there's at least 6 of them following behind it, just right behind it, lined up like dominoes, and the size of them compared to the craft was like. They were little compared to the craft. They were like, if the craft was this big, they were like this big. They were little. The craft was probably at least 300 feet across, at least, because
Okay.
the planes were little compared to it. But it just glided. It didn't do any weird maneuvers or anything. It just glided, this massive football-shaped glowing orb. Just glided and then it disappeared behind the clouds to the east and disappeared. I'm guessing it was going to Texas or something, but it was crazy. And then I looked into it and tried to figure it out and make sense of it because I'm just super into this stuff and I want to understand it. I want to like get inside of one of the craft and understand how they work and make sense of it because it's a mystery.
Right.
And that's really cool about it, but it's like I want to learn because I've just always been super fascinated by it. So I think the reason why it was glowing like that was because it was covered in a sheath of plasma. It was ionizing the atmosphere, and that was I guess you could say a byproduct of its propulsion system, because these things use massive amounts of energy or electricity to levitate, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And they ionize the atmosphere, which is why they glow. And I think the reason why it was that colors is because nitrogen is the primary element in our atmosphere.
Okay.
And when that's ionized, it glows orange or reddish yellow.
Okay.
And so
Fair.
it was ionizing the atmosphere. And I think when they are different colors, they're functioning at different frequencies around the craft, which ionizes different elements and creates different colors. So there's a bunch of crazy stuff, but
So do you
yeah.
think like they're trying to acclimate their technology or like their bodies, like themselves, or do you think both?
I guess both, but I think that they're surrounded by a field of electromagnetic energy. They're like a Tesla coil
Okay.
that floats in the sky. That's what I believe, and they're
Right.
just massive amounts of energy, and that's why they ionize the air around them and create plasma, and that's how they're able to levitate. It's called like electrogravitics. And yeah, it's like the next level of transportation, kind of like comparing an old sailing ship like the galleons that used to explore the world, like Christopher Columbus and stuff, comparing that to a jet fighter. Like that's what these craft are compared to our jet fighters. It's just a whole other level.
So with that being said, do you think that our government would be willing to coexist with something higher than us to get that technology?
Well, what's funny is
And there's a loaded question, but I'm also wondering if that gives us an advantage in just general as the U.S. Right?
if they had that technology. Oh yeah, no, I mean anybody who had that technology.
Yeah.
And that's what Bob Lazar said too. He's like, if anybody had this technology, they could just pound the enemy into dust. Because these craft, I think it's possible that they might be able to manipulate space-time. So they might be able to slow down time. And I'm pretty sure they can also go interdimensional,
Yeah.
which is kind of like astral, like they can shift into other realms, like the astral realm, like astral projection stuff. They can go there. They can go into like, and so these craft, it's like a whole other level. It's a whole other ball game.
Yeah.
It's not based on
No,
aerodynamics. It's not based on like Newtonian physics. It's based on energy and frequencies and like what Nikola Tesla was talking about.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of power behind it, and it's amazing. And that's a big reason why I'm so into it. But yeah, I think that governments do have this technology, but the only way I'm able to make sense of it is that it's like an agreement. Either there's a
Right.
transnational like organization that works across all countries. Countries don't matter to them, or they all agree, kind of like with the agreements with nuclear weapons. But it's at such a higher level that it kind of gives me peace of mind, because it makes me realize that most of the conflicts in the world, they might not necessarily be made up, but they're trivial. Like, we have the technology that has all of that stuff's obsolete. War's obsolete. Energy is obsolete. Like, because these craft don't run off of fuel. They don't run off of petroleum. They run off of free energy. They run off of zero-point energy, which is drawn from the fabric of space-time. And they have physics equations for that. Supposedly, like a cup, the space inside of a mug, if the energy that is embedded in space-time were to be tapped into within that cup, it would boil over the world's oceans. So there's massive amounts of energy all around us all the time. Like, I kind of like the theory of the electric universe. Like, there's energy everywhere.
Kind of like string theory.
Yeah, more than that. More
You think
like,
more in depth?
yeah, like quantum. Like, we're all interconnected.
Right.
Even,
Essentially the same energy, right?
yeah, and whether we're aware of it or not. And these craft can fly through that. That's the medium that they use.
Okay, I could see that. I mean, because that would allow them to be able to go to like parallel universes or different dimensions, right?
And I think certain beings can do that too.
Yeah.
Like maybe yogis or ghosts. Like, I think they're on another plane,
Agreed.
and we can tap into that. Like people, I can't remember what they're called, but there's people that can like talk with ghosts and see them.
Oh, like a medium?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're just more in touch with that plane.
Yeah.
And so there's all these different, I see it as like a spectrum. And like the electromagnetic spectrum is, the colors, or X-ray to ultraviolet or whatever. There's all these different colors on the spectrum. You could see that with dimensions.
Yeah.
Or frequencies or
I can see that.
whatever. And there's all kinds of different ones that we can go into or tap into or get influenced by. But I think these craft are able to navigate through those.
Okay. That's a good point.
It's amazing.
All right. So you're primarily interested in UFOs.
I'm into all kinds of paranormal. I just want to understand. Like, I want to understand the universe and how it works and why it is the way it is. And the truth is stranger than fiction.
Agreed.
Like, it's amazing and it's mind-blowing. And even if you might learn things for your whole life, you still might not know anything. And
Agreed.
It's just really cool.
With history kind of unrailing the way that it is, we had learned that something was one way for so long, and then years later we find out that the story is completely different based off of what we find. So I agree that I don't think we fully are getting the right stuff. As information gets passed along, it's not always accurate. So I agree in that aspect that I think we're missing, or they're omitting a lot that kind of changes how the story goes. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Norio?
Yes. Until 1964, I had no idea that New Mexico existed, because I was
There.
born and raised in Yokohama, Japan, 1944. And, I went to school over there, and then in 1964, I was attending a college in Tokyo, Japan, and I was reading English language newspaper in the lounge of that university, and It was in April of 1964, and I still clearly remember, even right now, the newspaper that I was reading had a fascinating news article. It said AP wires, and the origin of the story came from a small town in New Mexico named Socorro, New Mexico, which was it was amazing. I never heard of Socorro, much less about New Mexico. And so 1964 is the exact year when I started getting interested in New Mexico, USA. And so the article said that on April 24th, 1964, a highway patrol officer named Lonnie Zamora, who was chasing after a high-speeding car just outside of Socorro, New Mexico, and it was around 3:30 in the afternoon, and suddenly he heard a loud explosion in the desert, and so he stopped chasing that car and went towards the desert. And soon he had a fantastic sighting of a strange thing. An egg-shaped metallic object was standing on a tripod, and it was, white color, and it was the size of a car or double the size of a car. And it was only about 300 feet, in front of him. And he was so astounded by this scenery that he just didn't know what to say. And so he was watching this object just sitting there. And then soon he noticed two small entities coming out of the hatch of that thing. And these two small entities seemed to have been wearing some type of a white coverall or something, but they were small entities. And so pretty soon these entities began to realize that they were being observed by this patrol officer 300 feet away. And so they went inside this craft, and then the officer, Lonnie Zamora, heard a loud explosion. And then this object started, rising in the air, and suddenly it took off into the distance at an unimaginable rate of speed. It was almost like it dematerialized rather than they flew away. And so this incident is called the Lonnie Zamora Socorro incident of 1964, and this was one of the most amazing UFO sightings in American history. And 2 days later, 20 to 30 officials from Washington, D.C. came to Socorro, New Mexico, and investigated the whole thing. And they said that this was one of the most credible UFO incident that was ever recorded. And so this was the reason why I am here right now in this amazing state of New Mexico, which is called the Land of Enchantment. And I believe 100% that the Land of Enchantment nickname is true in every sense of the word. And so, coincidentally, and even though I don't believe in coincidence, the next year in 1965, I received a scholarship from a college in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so in 1965, I came to this amazing state of New Mexico, which I never really knew that it existed until that time. And so I attended college in Albuquerque, New Mexico from 1965. And, I actually spoke with Lonnie Zamora on the telephone, even though it was late. It was around 2009 that I actually, after moving from, from Los Angeles, I called Lonnie Zamora. He was still alive in 2009, and he told me the exact details of his amazing sighting, and I felt that he was really honest, sincere, and I believed 100% of what he described, what he saw. And so, even to this day, this is the reason why I'm in this great state of New Mexico, and I fell in love with this state. It's one of the most unique states in the entire America, if not in the entire world. And so that's why I'm living right now in this amazing state, and my hobby is to tell people how great New Mexico is, and you know, in many areas, New Mexico is one of the greatest states in America, even though it has only a population of 2 million in the entire state, which is the fifth largest state in the Union, but yet the entire population of this state is only 2 million. And it hasn't changed that much in the past even 20 years. The reason is because many people don't know much about New Mexico. Well, you know, and New Mexico is not regarded as the place to come to unless for certain reasons. But you know, even today, you hear of a lot of Californians moving out of California, and they move to Arizona, to Nevada, maybe to Colorado, to Utah, to Texas. But for some strange reason, New Mexico, they don't seem to stop in New Mexico. They
Agreed.
pass by New Mexico because they don't know much about New Mexico. But you know, the reason why I'm in New Mexico is because I believe that New Mexico is such an important state insofar as United States military technologies.
Okay.
In fact, this is the most advanced area of the latest in weapons technology systems. The directed energy weapon systems, the laser weapons, these, you know, top of the line, the latest technology is being tested even right now in places like White Sands, New Mexico.
Yep.
And then not only that, but New Mexico is a location of one of the most important national laboratories, you know, the Los Alamos National Laboratories, where they are testing the latest in DNA studies, you name it. All kinds of amazing researches are being conducted at Los Alamos National Laboratories. And so this is the place for the United States government to even conduct a lot of research, development, and testing. And so what can I say? Now, the second reason I'm here is because in 1990, I took a television crew from Japan, brought them over here to New Mexico to an Indian reservation called the Jicarilla Apache Reservation in northern New Mexico. And because in 1990, I heard some rumors that there was some strange things going on in northern New Mexico. And so this Japanese TV crew and I visited Dulce, New Mexico, which is part of the Jicarilla Apache Reservation, and we heard the rumors that there was some kind of a military, underground military installation in or around Dulce, and so we started interviewing a lot of Native Americans in Dulce, New Mexico in 1990. We were interviewing in the street of Dulce, and we were, you know, pointing the microphones to the locals and asking them if it's true, if they had seen strange lights in the sky and so on. And we were even asking people that, is there some kind of a base here? And because a lot of people, and this happens even today. Even today, a lot of folks in Dulce report occasionally the flight of military helicopters over their town where there's no military base there. But yet, even today, I get reports from locals there because I made a lot of friends in Dulce, New Mexico, the Hickory Apache Nation, and people still report seeing strange objects in the sky. People still report having experiences with some kind of, like strange entities, walking around the Navajo River in Dulce, and they even reports of what they thought could have been Bigfoot is still being reported over there. So it's a fascinating location, the Dulce, New Mexico area. And to me, a lot of strange things happened from 1967. In 1967, the Department of Energy, which was at that time called the Atomic Energy Commission, the Department of Energy exploded a nuclear device about a mile underground, right next to the Dulce area. It was called a Project Gas Buggy, and it took place in 1967 in December. And the Atomic Energy Commission decided to test the effect of a nuclear device explosion underground because they thought maybe by exploding this device, it will soften the hard rocks deep underground and make those rocks, just soften the rocks so that natural gas can come up and people can benefit from natural gas. And so that was called the Operation Project Gas Buggy, and it took place in 1967. And it was a good thing, but something strange happened around 10 years later.
I mean, do you think that was initially their intent? Or do you think that's just what they're telling us to ease, because we don't want the public to go crazy?
Yeah, well, there's a truth to a lot of rumors, what happened was 10 years after that Project Gas Buggy, many animals in that area began to show signs of deterioration, especially like cows,
Yeah.
and sheep and all other things, and it seemed like that radiation started slowly leaking in the air in the Dulce area beginning in the early 70s. And many cows became sick. And so what happened, according to a friend of mine whose name was Gabe Valdez, and he was the New Mexico State Patrol officer assigned by the state of New Mexico in 1979 to investigate this thing called cattle mutilations, because many ranchers in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado as well were reporting that their cow were mutilated. And so, this was a very serious thing, and the state of New Mexico decided to investigate and sent this patrol officer to be in charge of all kinds of criminal activity, including cattle mutilations. And they gave him a house in Dulce, New Mexico. And he investigated that case, cattle mutilations case, for at least 10 years. And his conclusion was that, it was not the aliens that were doing it, but it probably was the government who was trying to test the effect of radiation in the tissues of the cows and so on. So
And do you think they were like trying to keep it undercover?
I believe so. Definitely, something had been covered up, and in order to cover up that serious situation, uh, Gabe Valdez said that the U.S. Military, the government, was trying to stage some alien type scenario, or they sent some kind of a drone that looked like flying saucers or things like that. The Gabe Valdez said there was some kind of a psychological operations conducted by the military to convince the people in Dulce that the cattle mutilation were, done by some strange entities from outer space. So the truth is very difficult to say, because cattle mutilations not only happened in New Mexico, but it happened in Argentina,
Yeah.
it happened in Chile, it happened in many other locations. So we can't say that it's all because of the government. So it's still up in the air. It's still unsolved.
So I guess what my curiosity is, why would the government want the people of Dulce to believe that it was aliens? What would they gain from that?
Well, because Gabe Valdez said that they didn't want to cause panic, because of the Project Gas Buggy. The Project Gas Buggy was initially a good program to help, get the people. But, the fact is that there were positive things about Project Gas Buggy. Yes, even now, right now, you see a lot of oil, the gas, coming out, and it's benefiting the people of Dulce and the Hickory Apache Nation.
But don't they have a high cancer rate?
That is another thing. That's true. There is a high cancer rate in Dulce area because of, most likely from this kind of radiation. But this is a amazing subject matter that a lot of people don't want to talk about it.
So they were trying to shift the blame, essentially.
It seems like that.
Yeah. Like they're trying to say,
happens.
hey,
yes,
our amazing project didn't go amazingly.
Yes,
Aliens
something
did
is
it.
happening. That's why, John Austin, I met John Austin a few years ago in Rio Rancho, where I was living, and I was giving a presentation. Well, actually, I was just giving a music concert.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was awesome.
Yes,
Yes,
because
I read about
I'm a
your music.
musician, and I play New Mexico music, which I learned when I first came to Albuquerque in 1965.
Okay.
And so I became a New Mexico style musician, keyboardist, and so I was performing in a senior center in Rio Rancho a few years ago, and I met John Austin over there. And
Yeah, I really wanted to meet him because didn't you move here in 2008 or something?
that's right. In 2008, we moved from Los Angeles to New Mexico. My wife and I were living in Los Angeles until 2008, and we decided to move here because it was impossible for us to retire in California. So
I believe it.
yes, that's why we moved to this amazing state
It's
of
probably
New Mexico.
better that you did that.
Yes, and then I met John Austin, and he heard before my story, and he heard my adventures in and my interest in Kirtland Air Force Base,
Okay.
which is a very, very important base in America.
Okay.
Kirtland Air Force Base has one of the most amazing things that it's hard to believe. The Manzano underground nuclear storage facility inside Kirtland Air Force Base, which still exists right now, but that facility was allegedly closed down in 1992, and the Air Force allegedly moved that facility slightly to the other side of the Kirtland Air Force Base, but not too far away. But I go there to the Manzano underground base area to the fence line. Even once in a while, even now, I visit there sometimes, and there's still a security patrol doing the patrolling around that area. So they didn't close down that facility completely. But it's a very important location because they were testing all kinds of things, either in that facility or right next to that facility. And so, in 1979, there was an officer named Richard C. Doty, who was an officer that worked for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations inside Kirtland Air Force Base. And in 1979, a scientist, Albuquerque businessman by the name of Paul Benowitz, who was doing business with the Air Force because Paul Benowitz was selling all kinds of high-tech calibration equipment to Kirtland Air Force Base, in the early to mid-1970s. But anyway, in 1979, this Paul Benowitz, who lived right next to the fence of that Manzano underground base, he began seeing some lights hovering over the Manzano Hill. And so he was filming those lights every night. And pretty soon the Air Force found out that somebody was filming these lights over the Manzano Hill,
Okay.
And so the Air Force became worried, and Richard C. Doty of the AFOSI contacted Paul Benowitz and asked him to come to the base. And basically that was the beginning of the whole Dulce base story that some people say was concocted by this Air Force Office of Special Investigations officer, Richard Doty. Because Richard Doty told this businessman, Paul Benowitz, who was the owner of the Thunder Scientific Corporation.
It was like a psyop to throw him off.
Yes, that's right. The Thunder Scientific Corporation even still does business with the Kirtland Air Force Base. And for some, of course, the sons of Paul Benowitz, the late Paul Benowitz, his sons still operate the Thunder Scientific Corporation, which is located right next to the front entrance of Kirtland Air Force Base on Gibson. And I think it was, I forgot what the name of the street was, but it used to be the main gate. But Paul Benowitz's sons don't want to talk about their father, what their father was doing, or things like that. So there's still something going on with this whole scenario. But admittedly, Richard C. Doty told Paul Benowitz not to film these lights over the Manzano Hills because Richard Doty told Paul Benowitz that he should look towards what's happening in northern New Mexico. Richard Doty said to Paul Benowitz that there's more interesting thing happening in northern New Mexico, namely the so-called Dulce underground alien base.
Okay.
And so a lot of people think that is a story that was made up by Richard C. Doty. But even if you go to Dulce today, it's not that nothing strange is happening. In fact, even right now, things are happening in the Dulce area.
Okay.
When I lived up in TA, which is called Tierra Amarilla,
Yep.
which is right by Heron Lake. There was a cattle mutilation while I was living up there, and that was about 4 years ago, I
Wow,
think.
so recently.
And I'm like super into this, so I wanted to talk to people up there about this stuff, but it's a super rural community, a bunch of people living in the country, and I didn't want them to think I was a weirdo. So I tried to bring it up real lightly, but every time I talked to somebody, they had something to say.
Okay.
None of them were like, you're weird. They were like, oh yeah, this, and this, and this. Like, I talked to this one guy, and he said that he's seen vents way out in the wilderness out there, probably southwest.
Like in the mountain?
No, southwest of the lakes or the reservoirs out there, like vents coming out of the ground.
Oh.
And those, I think, could possibly be a tunnel system. The Taos hum, there's a lot of high strangeness and weird stuff going on in New Mexico in the early 90s.
Yeah. Lots.
And
yeah,
and like...
It was a pivot.
And that's what I grew up around, and it's probably a big reason why I'm like super into it. But like back then, there was this phenomenon called the Taos hum.
You still hear about it today.
Yeah, and when I started getting into all this stuff and trying to make sense of it, I was like, it's either like generators for an underground base or something, or maybe it's a drill. Like maybe it's a drill, and there's a patent for a drill from Los Alamos, so you can look up on Google, from the 1970s, and it's a nuclear-powered subterranean drill that literally melts the cavern that it creates. It burrows to the ground and melts it, glassifies it, and turns it into obsidian. And I think that that's what the Taos hum was. It was because some people said that they could feel it, not just hear it. It was like this low-frequency vibration sound that they could kind of feel and hear. Some people were sensitive to it. And I think that was the drill going through the bedrock from Los Alamos to Dulce. And those vents, the guy said, he's like, they don't want people around those vents.
Okay.
And he wouldn't tell me where they were. And other people that I talked to had similar stories of people that were like, you stay away from these areas. And they didn't know who they were.
So one question I have for you guys, you talking to the people in Taos and you talking to people in Dulce, knowing what they know, why do they stay? Why don't they ever move?
Maybe because...
Did you ever come across that conversation?
Why don't they move?
Yeah, like
because of the radiation and the weirdness?
Yeah, like even just verifying true facts of like stuff happening in their city. It didn't deter them at all. Most of them stay. And I'm just curious.
The fact is that Dulce had a population of at least 4,000 to 5,000 until the 1980s, and but then every year the population started declining, and right now the population of Dulce is just around around 2,500 or so, because a lot of young people moved out. The reason one of the interesting reasons is that because of these radiation and so on, there's a fertility problem among young, ladies in Dulce area, and that is could be one of the reasons. But anyway, regardless, a lot of Native Americans are moving to cities like Albuquerque and but the rest of the people stay, and so that's the state right now.
But Dulce's older than New Mexico, right?
Actually, you're right in saying that Dulce was founded by the Hispanos of New Mexico.
It's just all old. That's their land, they've been there forever.
Yeah, there is.
So
when the Spanish conquistadores came to New Mexico in 1500s, a lot of the descendants started living in especially like in northern New Mexico, and they were good in ranching, and they were good in raising sheep and all that.
Yeah.
And so the descendants of the Hispano people were in Dulce, and in 1907, I believe, the United States or the federal authorities created that Indian reservation in that place which was not called Dulce. It was called Agua Dulce, which means sweet water. And that was populated by then by the descendants of the conquistadores. And so when in 1907, when the reservation was established, they allowed the descendants of the Hispano people to remain there because they were still doing the ranching and so on. But New Mexico was founded in only in 2000. I mean, the 1912.
Yeah.
So slightly before that, they had this.
I get it.
Reservation.
They're like grandfathered in.
Yeah,
They're
yes,
just
that's right. Yeah,
I mean, this is the oldest part of the country.
I get that.
yes.
Not just, it's like the oldest dwellings, the oldest church, the oldest.
That's true.
Everything. This is the oldest. I'd say it's the older than the East Coast.
Probably. I mean, we have
older than the settlements over
some
there.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
old.
So I have your first kind of random question, just to kind of break it up a little. This one hits home for me because I was actually born here. What is one of the main turquoise producing areas in New Mexico? So where did most of the turquoise that we have come from in New Mexico, do you think?
I have no idea.
I don't know. Maybe
Any
Gallup,
guess? Gallup, okay. What would you say?
Farmington area.
Hatch.
Okay, that's fair. So I actually grew up here, and I didn't know that this is what they were mining, but Cerrillos, New Mexico,
Oh, really? No way.
is literally called Turquoise Trail or Highway 14 because it produced the most turquoise. And I thought that was really cool because I grew up there, up in the hills, and like I knew that we had a mine. I believe some of it was gold, but I didn't realize the impact of like turquoise mainly coming out of there. So if you've never visited before, it's really cool. It's right next to a small town called Madrid. And it's just this small, like hippie, funky town. I love it so much. It's very old and tradition kind of thing. But yeah, I thought that was a cool fact. So
Have you ever gotten turquoise from there?
no, I've never gotten it. So I kind of want to make it a point to see if anybody has some like authentic turquoise that they found there in the land. I think that would be really cool.
That is cool. Yeah, no, I think like back to your last question, it's just people, even when they were doing the atomic tests, people didn't really leave
No, they don't.
because this is their land. This is where they're from. This goes back all the way to the original conquistadors and the settlers. Like,
Agreed.
people are descendants. It's like people being descendants from pilgrims on the East Coast. People have lived here forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all like New Mexico was here before. But what blows me away is the juxtaposition between cutting edge, space age technology and ancient traditions and cultures and stuff.
Agreed.
You've got pueblos and you've got space age and you've got nuclear testing and you've got ancient traditions, and it's pretty amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair answer. So you guys can kind of answer this, in whatever order you'd like, but ultimately, do you think the government has an agreement with other beings to provide them with different types of things to test on, including humans?
No, I think, in my opinion, all the abductions most of them are called MILABs, which is an abbreviation for military abductions. I think that some abductions are extraterrestrial as well, but they don't involve all the fear stuff. Like that's kind of what I believe in, I guess. That's what makes sense to me. Like, I've even heard of Native Americans meeting with extraterrestrials and stuff, like
Yeah,
in
me too.
Arizona and stuff too. And they call them like their relatives or the star people.
Yes.
And they've said similar things with Bigfoot. And so, like, I think they know what's up, like, a lot, like Native Americans do. And they're like, oh yeah, this is who they are. This is what they are. This is the way it is. And we've been kind of like censored and told things while other things have been kept secret, but the government knows all this stuff, or maybe not the mainstream government, but super deep black projects and highly classified areas and private contractors and stuff. But I think a lot of the abduction stuff is kind of like the cattle mutilation stuff. It's meant to scare people, and a lot of it didn't really happen. Betty and Barney Hill was the first like major one that was public, and that was in the 60s in New Hampshire. And I think that one was man-made. I think that was a man-made abduction. And I think a lot of them were. They used back-engineered technology from crash retrievals like Roswell, and developing their own technology like Nikola Tesla and T. Townsend Brown, I think his name was. We were doing research. It was the next Manhattan Project.
Okay.
Anti-gravity was the next Manhattan Project. So this was in the 50s, and it's publicized. You can look it up. But then it all disappeared. It was like the Jetsons, but then it disappeared. But I think it really happened, and we have Jetson technology, but it's all deep black,
so I'm
highly
wondering
classified.
if like New Mexico starts these projects and then we kind of ship them off somewhere else where it can be sort of executed differently.
Well, I think that's what happened with the atomic bomb, but I think they just correlate. Like all the labs and all the organizations and stuff, they work with each other and they correlate or whatever. I think that Roswell did happen, and that is actually something that I wanted to talk about. I don't think it was downed by a radar installation malfunction with the frequency of the radar causing the craft to crash. I don't think that's what happened. I think it was intentionally downed, shot down by a directed energy weapon.
Okay.
That might have been a part of a radar installation. And there's this really interesting documentary about that talks about the Aztec UFO crash, which also happened in New Mexico.
Yes.
There's a few UFO crashes. And one of them that's really interesting that Doty talked about wasn't found for like 4 years or something. And it just sat in the desert. I think that's amazing.
That's amazing, but there's so much desert that I
Yeah.
could see that there's
Well, this was back in the 40s or the 50s.
Yeah.
So it was a long time ago, and I just think it's amazing to it's horrible and really sad that these beings were shot down, but just to think of that craft and that material just sitting there underneath the New Mexico sky, through the snow and through the summers, just sitting, nobody even knows about it. But yeah, I think Roswell happened. I think Oppenheimer was involved with that. I think some of the material was taken definitely to Kirkland, I'm pretty sure, and to Los Alamos.
And you don't think any of this is based on an agreement between
I don't think they were like, oh, if you give us technology, we'll let you abduct people.
Yeah.
I think they could abduct. See, that's the thing, and some people think, and you might, we might not agree or whatever, but I think some people think that some extraterrestrials are hostile or that they're a threat. But if they really were, that'd be like us looking at an anthill. We can kick it over, we can pour gas on it, we can light it, we can do whatever we want. And I think that's how they are to us. But they're not doing that. And it's like, what if you're Superman? Are you going to go around killing everybody?
Yeah.
If you have that much power, and I think that they're spiritually more advanced too, like with us, that's our problem now with nuclear weapons. We're not spiritually evolved. We're like little kids finding a gun in our parents' closet.
Yeah.
No,
evolution isn't quite there yet.
Yeah, but if we can be spiritually evolved to the level of our technology, we won't destroy ourselves. And they've gotten past that point.
Okay.
So they're like, why do we need to kill you? We have free energy. We don't need your resources.
Yeah, it's not a necessity at this point, I guess.
Yeah, there might be the hybrid thing, there might be some truth to that.
Okay.
I don't know what that kind of stuff is.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Norio, what do you think?
Well, I think, yes, I think it's very possible what he said. But I've studied this whole UFO phenomenon since 1961. And even today, I still don't have the answer, nor does the United States government, in the sense that this phenomenon may not necessarily be totally 100% physical phenomena, but yet, because this phenomena seemed to be able to materialize suddenly and dematerialize, suddenly as well. And so there's a confusion even among the Pentagon. I believe that there's a several factions within the Pentagon that believe that this phenomenon could be, some kind of a paraphysical type phenomenon, managed by some kind of a sentient, extra-dimensional type entities that could exist in this amazing universe. And so therein is the confusion. This is the reason why the Pentagon has not come up with any concrete announcement about this phenomenon. We have the UFO congressional hearing every year, but yet we haven't seen a definite physical, tangible evidence or artifact whatsoever of what they're talking about, because perhaps maybe this is something that they can't explain in full unless you go into some kind of a spiritual aspect of this thing. And this thing, I think, it's definitely related to some kind of a spiritual phenomenon as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what's amazing about it.
I could see that.
Is the connection between all this and consciousness, and how that's connected to everything. And they realize this, and they know this in the government as well, and deep black projects as well.
Yeah.
Like, that's a trippy thing. When I was a kid, I remember being at the old Barnes and Nobles here in Santa Fe.
Oh yeah.
And by the rail yard, and picking up this book about like astral projection by the government, Russian spies using astral projection. And I was like, whoa, that's totally... I believed it, and turns out they've been doing that stuff. The CIA too. They've done research into astral projection, and
But do you think we could actually get there on our own without any higher being influence? I just feel like we might be behind in that aspect.
What do you mean, like?
I just don't know that we would ever get to where we are without having alien influence.
Well, I think they want us to grow up.
Yeah.
And they're watching over us. I don't think they want us to destroy ourselves, but it's kind of like when you have a kid.
Right.
You have to let the kid learn on their own, and they don't want to interfere too much. Maybe like a weird like Star Trek protocol or something, like don't mess with another civilization and let it develop on its own.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it's at. It's like we might be at the like teenage stage where hopefully we don't destroy ourselves, and then we can grow up.
Yeah.
And I think they want that too. I don't think they want to intervene and force us, but I do think they're definitely watching over us.
Okay. I get that. So here's your next kind of random question to break it up, and then there's a last topic I want to talk about, but it's pretty heavy that I kind of want to have some fun before we do it. What animal is Capitan, New Mexico best known for? So Capitan is going towards sort of Ruidoso area. What animal are they known for?
Roadrunners?
Okay, that's a good guess.
I have no idea.
So you'll definitely have to check it out. But Capitan is known for Smokey the Bear.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I
So
see.
Smokey the Bear originated from there. They do have the Smokey the Bear Museum where he's actually buried, so you can go see.
Really? I didn't know
grave.
that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I was in Girl Scouts. We went in like 2nd grade, and I have loved Smokey the Bear since then. And it's so cool. You can go to the museum. It's like $2 to enter, and you get to see all of this cool story that kind of was built around him. He's just an icon. Like, he'll be around forever. So
Yeah, I was super proud when I found out that he was from New Mexico.
yeah, it kind of helped get us on the map. So this last question is, like I said, a little intense, but kind of what you guys were saying is leading into it perfectly. So we have a lot of religious historical text about God, about Buddha, about whatever you want to fill in. But it ultimately leads to a being that's higher than we are, which parallel to any type of alien force, if you will. Do you think there's a possibility that we're supposed to be like, in a sense, that this is what we're saying, and different people from around the world have created those names like Jehovah, God, Buddha, Allah? They all have these similar things across the board as, gods. That is there a chance that it was maybe ourselves from the future, thus aliens, that we're actually talking about?
I think it's both. I think there is God, and I think there is a higher power, but I also think that some of these explanations back then, like, I don't remember who it was, but he spoke to a burning bush.
Yeah.
That could have been what I saw. You know, it's like, how do you describe a craft sheathed in plasma that looks like it's on fire all the time?
Yeah. Okay.
Back then,
Fair.
it looks like a burning bush, you know? So I think there's both. And that's a crazy thing, too. I think it's possible, like with the hybrid thing I was talking about, the Virgin Mary, Jesus was born by a miraculous conception.
Yes.
And women have had that happen with abductions. And then their uterus or their embryo gets taken later. So Jesus could have been like inseminated or whatever.
Are you saying Jesus is an alien?
Maybe partly, maybe a hybrid. Maybe that's why he was able to do all the crazy things he was able to do. Maybe he was put there to help guide humanity and to keep us from destroying ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it could have been a miracle, but it could have also been that she was abducted and impregnated, and I don't know. I mean, but that's happened to women nowadays, and you can look it up.
What do you think, Norio?
Well, I think this is all related to this possibility of the so-called disclosure. Either disclosure of these things by the government or by these entities themselves. And I take a position that there will never be any disclosure of these things by the government, but the only disclosure will probably come from the entities themselves, if they exist. Okay, only from the entities themselves who could decide that the time when they will disclose themselves to the public globally. And I don't know when that will be, but I heard a lot of people, and a lot of people say a lot of things every year. Every year they say, 2025 could be the year of disclosure. But the latest is that I heard that 2027 could be the year when these entities will finally disclose themselves. But you never know until it happens. And, until then, we just have to, have an open mind. And because it's hard to prove anything.
Yeah, it is.
We don't know the future. Nobody knows the future, but we can only speculate. But some people say that all these strange things that are happening in the skies, especially since last November when a lot of people back east were seeing weird drones and flying, and some of these so-called drones may not be actually governmental drones, but they could be these entities mimicking human technology by making simulating these human-looking drones, when actuality it may not be, because in the 1980s, a lot of people in the Hudson Valley used to see humongous black triangular craft flying in the Hudson Valley area, and this 1980s was when the America was testing F-117s and B-2 bombers, the prototypes that were triangular in shape. And so this goes back even to the 1800s, when a lot of people witnessed seeing airships, when at that time there weren't any, but yet they were seeing this crude-looking airships. And so, to me, it's possible that these entities are trying to adjust to the people's understanding of technology of that time.
Agreed.
Of that epoch.
Yeah.
So that's just one possibility. And then the other possibility is that by creating all these drone situation sightings and so on, maybe they are trying to lessen the panic thing, in the future, slowly but surely
Over time.
acclimatizing
Yeah.
us into this thing.
That makes sense because in the Bible it talks about how Jesus is sent in a human body so we could understand him. I feel like that's exactly what you're saying right now. Is if he showed up in his real form, we'd be like, yo, what's going on? Like, execute, you know?
Yeah, maybe to help guide us and help us grow up or whatever.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is really interesting about this subject is like when people are like, what is it? You know, what do you think it is? Is it aliens? Is it interdimensional beings? Is it people from the future? I think it's all of the above. And it's really neat how, like, I figured out a lot of it, but then I kind of got sad because I had figured it out. And it's kind of neat to not know.
The chase.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, it keeps you just,
Yeah.
you're just like, what's going on? And you're
Yeah,
trying to figure it
opening it.
out.
Oh, that's great. So what is probably the most outlandish theory in New Mexico that you've ever heard of? Like anything having to do with NM?
Well, one interesting thing that I heard is for example, the native people in New Mexico seem to believe in the sacredness of certain locations. And I heard many times that, especially in the Albuquerque area, that a lot of local people, Native American people especially, believe that the Sandia Mountains is somehow sacred. And, come to think of it, New Mexico, especially in this area, we haven't seen tremendous hurricanes or all these tornadoes that we see in other states like Texas and Oklahoma and so on. But here in this area, I think that because of the presence of the Sandia Mountains that protect certain elements from,
Okay.
causing natural disasters. I think it could be that, maybe it's true that there are some sacred areas in New Mexico that protect people somehow.
Okay. That's fair. I've heard that. Yeah. It's taught. What about you, John?
I'm gonna go with Dulce. This one's kind of crazy, but I don't know. I think there is a tunnel from Los Alamos up to Dulce, and they create biological robots. They create little aliens that look like aliens, but they're like grays, and they're used to abduct people and scare the crap out of them. And they basically create these things through genetic engineering and cybernetics. And there's other places that do that too, but I think they have facilities like that, and one of them's in that area, but it's all underground.
Okay.
And I can't
Okay.
really, yeah.
All right. So as people who are seasoned in this kind of conversation, what words of wisdom would you give people who maybe doubt themselves or want to do the research but don't know how to accept that things are a little bit different in the universe? Basically, how would you encourage people to keep asking questions, to keep doing research, to keep challenging what they see?
Well, that's how I got into it again, because I always believed in it. But then as I got older, you become a teenager and you want to do what everybody else does. And it wasn't really encouraged, and nobody I knew really believed in it, and it was kind of taboo. And so I just kind of lost interest. But then as I got older, I was like, well, what am I really interested in? Like, what lights a fire under my ass? And I just can't, I can eat it for breakfast. Like, I'm just super into it.
Yeah.
And I was like, this subject, and I researched into it, and it just do what you love. Do what you love. Just do it. Don't care about what people think. You'll thank yourself later. And it's been an amazing experience and journey, and it's taught me so much about everything. And I've gone to Rachel and lived in Rachel. I've met you. And it's just blown my mind, and I like that. I like to blow my mind, and it's just been amazing. And so, yeah, just do it. Do it. If you love something, do it, because you'll regret it if you don't.
Yeah.
And it'll take you to amazing places that you couldn't have even imagined. And
Agreed.
it's worth it.
I love that. That's great.
And even if you don't right away, do it later, because that's what I did later. So, yeah, just do it.
Just trust yourself. What about you, Norio?
Yes, basically, I believe that we have to ask our hearts what is good, what is not good, and every human being, I believe, has some kind of a discernment of what is good and what is not good, and so I think the best thing is to keep an open mind and do the best to approach what is benevolent and not malevolent, and so I think that as long as we follow the what tells you in your heart, I think we're on the right track.
And I believe that's natural law.
Yeah.
Like, I think nature knows what's good and bad too. And that's why sailors that have been shipwrecked have been saved by orcas and killer whales and stuff, and why
Yeah.
our animals help us when we need help.
No, phenomena is all around us all the time. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I hope this sparks other people to like either continue doing the research or start looking into it, start finding answers. I'm really excited to kind of dive into more of what we spoke with. So for my listeners, I will be posting social media that you can get links to the different things that we spoke about, including some of the things that Norio spoke about. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time. Okay.
Good job, guys.
Thank you, guys.